Blood is supposed to be a bond, a promise whispered in the marrow of your bones. It is the river that carries the stories of your ancestors, the silent oath that ties you to your kin, a current of loyalty that should, by all rights of nature, flow toward you, not away. For me, blood was a cage. It was the iron in the bars, the rust on the lock, the cold, hard floor upon which I slept. It was the source of my shame, the mark of my otherness, the very thing that was supposed to make me one of them, yet it was the architect of my profound and unending isolation. My own blood had betrayed me long before my family ever had the chance. Tonight, it would simply make the betrayal official, a public spectacle for the hungry eyes of the Blackwood Pack. The air in the clearing crackled with a tension that was almost sentient, a predator coiled in the deepening twilight. It smelled of damp earth, crushed pine needles, and the cloying metallic scent of anticipation that always preceded the proving. Below the ceremonial ledge where I stood, the pack was a sea of shifting shadows and gleaming eyes, a collective beast holding its breath. Every year, the new generation of wolves, those who had come of age, were brought here to complete their first full shift under the gaze of the full moon and the pack alpha, my father. It was a rite of passage, a celebration of strength and belonging. For me, it was a death sentence served on a silver platter. I could feel the moon's pull, a phantom tide against the shores of my skin. It was a hollow echo of what the others described, a dull ache where a raging inferno should have been. For 20 years, I had been Ilara, the dud, the alpha's daughter who could not shift, a flaw in a bloodline that prided itself on perfection. If you're already captivated by Ilara's story, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think is going to happen next. My sister Lyra had shifted 2 years prior. Her transformation had been a thing of brutal elegance, her wolf a mirror of our father's, a sleek, powerful creature of midnight fur and amber eyes. She was the embodiment of our legacy. I was its shadow, a walking, breathing stain upon their honor. My father stood at the center of the clearing, his arms crossed over his massive chest. Alpha Valerius did not look at me. He never did, not when the pack was watching. To acknowledge me was to acknowledge his failure. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the rising moon, his jaw a hard line of granite. My mother stood beside him, her expression a carefully constructed mask of maternal pride that fooled no one. Her eyes, when they flickered toward me, were chips of ice. Rejection was a language I had learned before I could even speak. It was in the way pack members averted their gazes, the way children were hushed when I passed, the way my own sister looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. It was a cold, heavy cloak I could never take off. The proving was simply the final, formal stitching of that cloak to my very skin. The moon climbed higher, a perfect luminous disk that bathed the clearing in an ethereal glow. A low hum started to build within the crowd, the thrum of wolves on the verge of transformation. One by one, the other youths of my year began to tremble, their bones cracking and reshaping in the sacred, violent ballet of the shift. Grunts of pain turned into the snarls of nascent wolves. The air grew thick with the scent of magic and wildness. I stood alone on the ledge, my body stubbornly, traitorously human. I closed my eyes, willing the change, begging my blood to do the one thing it was meant to do. Please, just this once, let me be one of them. The plea was a silent scream in the hollows of my soul. Nothing. Only the familiar, sickening lurch of failure in my gut. A wave of snickers rippled through the younger members of the pack. I could feel their scorn like a physical blow, each laugh a stone hurled at my already fractured pride. I opened my eyes and looked down, my gaze finding Lyra's. She stood beside our father now, her perfect face twisted in a smirk of triumph. She shook her head, a minute, dismissive gesture that said everything. You are nothing. The final youth completed his shift, a scrawny brown wolf who yipped with joy, immediately trotting to his proud parents. Now, all eyes were on me. The clearing fell into a profound silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the ragged sound of my own breathing. My father finally turned his head, and his eyes, cold and hard as obsidian, pinned me to the spot. He lifted his chin, his voice booming across the clearing, each word a hammer blow. Ilara, step forward. My legs felt like lead, but I obeyed, walking to the edge of the stone platform. I stood before them all, exposed and utterly broken. The moonlight seemed to mock me, illuminating every flaw, every tremor in my hands. The moon is full, he declared, his voice devoid of any warmth. The blood of the Blackwood Pack is strong. Today, we celebrate that strength. He paused, letting the weight of his unspoken accusation settle over me. And we purge our weakness. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Purge. The word was a death knell. It was a term reserved for traitors, for Omega wolves who challenged the hierarchy, for those who brought disease or shame to the pack. It was not a word used for one's own child. But then I had never truly been his child. I was a defect, an error to be corrected. My mother's mask finally cracked, a flicker of something, not love, but perhaps a primal, vestigial instinct crossing her features before it was quickly suppressed. Lyra, however, looked ecstatic. Her eyes shone with a predator's glee. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she would be the only daughter, the perfect heir, untainted by my failure. Ilara of the House of Valerius has failed the proving. My father's voice rang out, a formal judgment. She is unable to answer the call of the moon. She is unable to honor her blood. He took a step forward, his shadow falling over me. I wanted to shrink away, to disappear, but I was frozen, a rabbit in the path of a stoat. This pack is built on power, on purity, on the sacred bond of the wolf. She has no part in that bond. His gaze swept over the pack, daring anyone to object. No one did. They were his to command, their loyalty absolute. Therefore, as alpha of the Blackwood Pack, I declare her packless. The word hung in the air, colder and sharper than any blade. Packless. It was worse than death. To be packless was to be a ghost, a wanderer with no ties, no protection, no identity. It was to be utterly and completely alone, a target for any rogue or rival pack. I felt the pack bond, the thin, frayed thread that had connected me to them, snap. The psychic backlash was immense, a physical agony that brought me to my knees. It felt like my soul was being ripped from my body. I gasped, clutching my chest as the faces of my family, my pack, swam before my eyes, their expressions ranging from cold indifference to overt pleasure. The world tilted, the edges of my vision blurring. In that moment of excruciating pain, something inside me fractured. A strange, cold fire raced along my veins. It wasn't the heat of the shift, but something else entirely. Something ancient and silver. A patch of skin on the back of my hand shimmered, and for a fleeting second, fine, gossamer hairs of pure moonlight silver sprouted before vanishing as quickly as they appeared. It was my curse, my deepest shame, manifesting in my moment of ultimate agony. No one seemed to notice. They were too busy watching my father. "Leave this territory," he commanded, his voice the final nail in my coffin. "You are no longer welcome here. You are nothing to us. If you are found on Blackwood land by sunrise, you will be hunted as the trespasser you are." He turned his back on me then, a gesture of finality that was more devastating than any physical blow. The pack, following his lead, turned away as well. One by one, they began to disperse, melting back into the forest, their new wolves running with joyous abandon, leaving me alone in the moonlit clearing, a ghost in the ruins of my own life. I remained on my knees, the cold stone seeping into my bones, the silence of the forest pressing in on me. The moon, my silent tormentor, shone down, indifferent. My own blood had cast me out. The very people who should have protected me had sentenced me to a fate worse than death. I was packless. I was nothing. And the hunt would begin at sunrise. The forest floor was a treacherous tapestry of roots and shadows, each one seeming to reach out and grab at my ankles as I ran. Panic was a wild, frantic bird beating its wings against the cage of my ribs. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent a fresh jolt of terror through me. Sunrise was still a distant promise, but I knew my father. His proclamation was for the pack, a show of righteous law. His true intent would be swifter, more personal. He wouldn't risk me surviving until dawn. He and Lyra would come for me themselves, to ensure the family's stain was washed away for good. The air was cold, biting at my exposed skin through the thin fabric of my ceremonial dress, now ripped and smeared with dirt. I had no weapon, no supplies, no destination. My only instinct was to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the heart of the Blackwood territory. But where could I go? Every direction led to another pack's land, and a packless wolf was fair game to all. I was a lamb running from wolves into a forest full of more wolves. The irony was a bitter pill in my throat. I risked a glance over my shoulder, my heart hammering against my sternum. Nothing. Just the endless, oppressive dark of the ancient woods. But I could feel them. It was a primal sense, a faint vibration on the edge of my awareness. They were hunting me. The scent of their pursuit was a phantom on the wind. My father's cold fury, like iron and winter frost, and Lyra's eager bloodlust sharp and venomous. They were taking their time, enjoying it, savoring the terror they knew I was feeling. A sob caught in my throat, but I choked it down. Tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. They would blur my vision, slow me down. I had to be smarter, faster. But how could I outrun two of the pack's strongest predators? I was merely human, fragile and weak. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed in protest. I stumbled over a gnarled root, crashing to the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a moment I lay there, gasping, the scent of damp soil filling my nostrils. Pain radiated from my twisted ankle. It wasn't broken, but it was badly sprained. Getting up was an agony. Every step now was a fresh wave of fire shooting up my leg. I was done for. They would catch me. The thought brought a strange, fatalistic calm. I leaned against the rough bark of a massive oak, my breath coming in ragged pants. Perhaps this was for the best. A quick death was better than a slow one, starving and alone in the wilderness. The sound came then, not from behind, but from ahead. A low growl that was nothing like the ones I had grown up with. This sound was deeper, laced with an ancient power that seemed to make the very air vibrate. It was a sound of absolute authority, the growl of a king. My blood ran cold. A rogue? An alpha from another territory? It didn't matter. I was trapped. To my left, the forest gave way to a sheer rock face. To my right, a rushing river, too wide and fast to cross. And now, something was blocking my path forward. From the shadows between the trees, two figures emerged. Not the one I had heard, but the ones I had been fleeing. My father and Lyra, both in their wolf forms. They stalked into the small clearing, their movements fluid and predatory. My father's black wolf was immense, a creature of nightmare and shadow. Lyra's was smaller but just as deadly, her amber eyes burning with malice. They circled me slowly, trapping me against the oak tree. My father let out a low snarl, a sound of disgust. "Look at you," the sound seemed to say. "Pathetic. Human." Lyra was the first to move. She lunged, not for my throat, but for my injured leg. Her teeth sank into my calf, and a scream of pure agony was ripped from my lungs. Pain, white-hot and blinding, consumed me. I collapsed, my back sliding down the tree trunk. Lyra pulled back, blood dripping from her muzzle, a look of savage satisfaction in her eyes. This wasn't a hunt. It was torture. They wanted me to suffer. My father stepped forward, his massive head lowering until his face was inches from mine. His hot, fetid breath washed over me. I could smell my own blood on his lips. This was it. The end. I closed my eyes, a single tear finally escaping, tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. And then, the world-shaking growl came again, this time from directly behind my father. It was so powerful, so utterly dominant, that it felt like a physical force. My father and Lyra froze, their bodies instantly rigid with shock and a primal fear I had never seen in them before. Slowly, they turned. Out of the deepest shadows, a wolf emerged. It was a creature from legend, a beast of impossible size. If my father was a shadow, this wolf was the abyss itself. His fur was the color of a starless midnight, so black it seemed to drink the moonlight. His eyes were not yellow or amber, but a startling, intelligent silver that seemed to glow with their own internal light. He was bigger than my father by a third, his muscles coiling with a power that felt geologic in scale. This was an alpha. Not just an alpha, but something more. Something ancient. The air crackled with his power. The birds went silent. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath in deference. He took a single, deliberate step forward, and my father, the fearsome alpha of the Blackwood pack, actually took a step back, lowering his head in a gesture of submission. Lyra was practically flat on the ground, whining low in her throat. The massive wolf's silver eyes ignored them completely. They were fixed on me. He saw me huddled and bleeding at the base of the tree. He saw the wound in my leg, and his gaze, which should have been filled with the same contempt as all the others, held something else entirely. It was a look of profound, heart-stopping recognition. A low, rumbling growl started in his chest again, but this time it was not a challenge. It was a promise of retribution. He took another step, and my father, realizing he was the target of that promise, finally broke. He turned and fled, Lyra scrambling after him, their powerful forms crashing through the undergrowth in a blind panic. They were gone. The great black wolf did not pursue them. His focus remained entirely on me. He padded forward silently, his paws making no sound on the forest floor. He stopped a few feet away, his sheer size blocking out the moon. I trembled, not knowing what to expect. Was I simply a prize to be claimed? A piece of meat passed from one predator to another? He lowered his massive head, and for a heart-stopping moment I thought he was going to finish what my father had started. Instead, his wet nose gently nudged my hand. His silver eyes were filled with a strange, aching tenderness. He let out a soft whine, a sound of distress, and then his gaze moved to my leg. The pain from the bite was a roaring fire, but under his steady gaze, it seemed to dull slightly. He looked back at my face, and there was a question in his eyes, a silent plea for trust. Then, in a shimmer of moonlight and shadow, the great wolf dissolved. Where the beast had stood, a man now knelt. He was tall, impossibly so, with broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build that spoke of centuries of command. His hair was as black as his wolf's pelt, and his eyes were the same startling, intelligent silver. He was dressed in simple, dark clothing, but he wore an aura of authority like a royal mantle. He was, without a doubt, the most beautiful and terrifying man I had ever seen. He didn't speak. He simply moved closer, his movements graceful and deliberate. He reached out, his hand hovering over my wounded leg. I flinched, a lifetime of expecting pain making me recoil. His hand stopped. His silver eyes met mine, and in their depths, I saw not a predator, but a protector. He saw the flashes of silver on my skin where I had scraped it, the faint shimmer that always appeared in moments of extreme pain or fear. But unlike everyone else, he didn't look away in disgust. He looked at it with a reverence that stole the air from my lungs. He had saved me. He had faced down my father, the most powerful wolf I knew, and made him flee like a frightened pup. And now, he was looking at me, the packless dud, the family shame, as if I were something precious, something worth saving. Before things get even more intense, let me know if you're hooked by hitting that like button, and comment below if you think Alara should trust this mysterious stranger or run. He knelt in the dirt before me, a king in all but name, and the entire world seemed to shrink to the space between us. The night sounds of the forest, which had been a symphony of terror moments before, faded into a muted hum. All that existed was the intensity of his silver gaze and the warmth radiating from his body, a stark contrast to the chilling fear that had been my only companion. His hand remained suspended in the air, a silent offering of peace. He was waiting for my permission, a concept so foreign it took me a moment to comprehend. No one had ever asked for my permission. I had always been something to be commanded, dismissed, or hurt. This simple act of courtesy was more disarming than any show of force. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. My throat was too tight, with shock and pain to form words. His expression softened, and he slowly, carefully lowered his hand. His fingers, long and calloused, brushed against the torn fabric of my dress near the wound. His touch was electric, a jolt of warmth that chased away some of the deep, gnawing cold. It was gentle, so incredibly gentle, as if he were touching the most delicate of flowers rather than a bloody, mangled limb. He examined the bite, his brow furrowed in concentration. The moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face, casting his high cheekbones and strong jaw in silver and shadow. He possessed a kind of stark, preternatural perfection that was both intimidating and mesmerizing. "He will answer for this," he said. His voice was the sound of the deep earth, a low, resonant baritone that vibrated right through me. It held no anger, no rage, just a calm, absolute certainty that was far more terrifying. It was the voice of a man who did not make threats, only stated facts. He looked up from my leg, his eyes meeting mine. "He will not touch you again. I swear it." The vow hung in the air between us, heavy and unbreakable. I could only stare at him, my mind reeling. Why? Who are you? The questions were a frantic chorus in my head, but I remained silent. He seemed to understand. He reached into a pouch at his belt and drew out a strip of clean, dark cloth. With movements that were both practiced and tender, he began to clean the wound, his touch firm but careful. I hissed in pain as the cloth touched the raw flesh, and he paused, his silver eyes filled with an apology. "I am sorry," he murmured. "This will help." As he worked, I studied him, trying to piece together the impossible reality of his existence. He was not from my pack, nor any of the neighboring territories. I would have heard of a wolf like him. His power was a palpable thing, a living aura that clung to him. It was ancient and vast, making my father's authority feel like a child's tantrum in comparison. When he was finished cleaning the wound, he tore another strip from the cloth and began to bind it, his hands moving with an efficiency that suggested he was no stranger to treating injuries. His proximity was overwhelming. He smelled of pine, night air, and something else. Something uniquely his. A scent of ozone, like the air after a lightning strike, clean and wild and powerful. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Once the makeshift bandage was secure, he sat back on his heels. The silence stretched, no longer threatening but filled with a new, tentative curiosity. He had not asked my name, nor offered his. He had simply acted. He had protected me. "You are safe now," he said, his gaze searching my face. I finally found my voice, though it was little more than a ragged whisper. Why? It was the only question that mattered. Why did you help me? He held my gaze for a long moment, his silver eyes seeming to see straight into the broken, lonely places inside me. Because no one should be hunted by their own, he answered, his voice soft. The words were simple, but the subtext was a chasm of shared understanding. He saw me. He saw the betrayal, the injustice. He didn't see a flawed creature who deserved her fate. He saw a victim. And because I have been looking for you for a very long time. The statement landed with the force of a physical blow. Looking for me? It made no sense. I was nobody. A pariah. People didn't look for me. They looked away from me. I don't understand. My internal monologue was a jumble of confusion and disbelief. This must be a dream. A hallucination brought on by pain and fear. In a moment, I will wake up, and Lyra's teeth will be in my throat. But the pain in my leg was real, and so was the solid presence of the man kneeling before me. He offered me his hand. "Can you stand?" I looked at his outstretched hand. It was a lifeline. Hesitantly, I placed my trembling fingers in his. His grip was firm and warm, engulfing my hand completely. He rose to his feet in a single fluid motion, gently pulling me up with him. I put weight on my injured leg and cried out, stumbling against him. Instantly, his other arm was around my waist, steadying me, holding me securely against his hard-muscled body. The contact was shocking in its intimacy. I was pressed against his chest, my head resting just below his shoulder. I could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart against my ear. For a moment, I just sagged against him, my strength completely gone. He held my weight easily, one hand still clasping mine, the other a solid, unmoving band around my waist. He didn't rush me. He simply stood there, a bastion of strength, letting me borrow his. After a few moments, I managed to regain some semblance of balance, though I was still leaning heavily on him. I can't walk," I stammered, shame heating my cheeks. "You will not have to," he said simply. Before I could process his words, he bent and swept me up into his arms. The movement was so effortless it was as if I weighed nothing at all. I gasped, my arms instinctively going around his neck. I was cradled against his chest like a child, my head tucked under his chin. The position was shockingly intimate, and yet it felt right. It felt safe. I had never felt safe before in my entire life. "My name is Kale," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear as he began to walk, his stride long and sure-footed, seemingly unaffected by my weight or the treacherous terrain. "Kyle," I repeated, the name feeling strange and momentous on my tongue. I should have been terrified. I was in the arms of a powerful, unknown shifter, being carried away to a place I did not know. My family had just tried to murder me. I was packless and alone. By all logic, this was just a different kind of danger. But my instincts, the ones that had screamed at me to run from my father, were silent now, curled against Kale's chest, with the steady rhythm of his heart. Beneath my ear and his powerful arms holding me secure, the frantic bird of panic in my ribs had finally, blessedly, gone still. For the first time, in the heart of the terrifying, lonely dark, I was not afraid. We moved through the forest like a phantom, Kale's steps utterly silent despite the speed at which he traveled. The world became a blur of moon-dappled leaves and dark, ancient tree trunks. I remained tucked against his chest, a strange sense of peace settling over me, a balm on the raw wounds of my spirit. The physical pain in my leg was a distant, throbbing ache, overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of security his presence provided. He carried me not as a burden, but as something precious, his grip firm yet gentle. I watched the play of moonlight on his stoic profile, the hard line of his jaw, the straight bridge of his nose. He was a creature of stark, formidable beauty, and yet there was a profound loneliness in his silver eyes, a hint of a burden carried for centuries. After what felt like an eternity, he slowed his pace. The dense forest began to thin, opening into a hidden valley I had never known existed, though I had spent my life wandering the periphery of the Blackwood territory. Nestled in the heart of the valley, shielded by a ring of towering sentinel-like pines, was a small stone cottage. A thin tendril of smoke curled from its chimney, a welcoming beacon in the night. It looked impossibly cozy, a pocket of warmth and safety carved out of the wilderness. Kale carried me across a small, babbling brook and up to the heavy wooden door. It swung open before he touched it, as if sensing his approach. He stepped inside, and the warmth of the cottage enveloped us. The interior was simple but comfortable. A fire crackled merrily in a large stone hearth, casting a warm, flickering glow over the room. There was a sturdy wooden table, a few chairs, and a small cot piled high with furs in the corner. The air smelled of wood smoke, drying herbs, and something else. The faint, clean scent of ozone that clung to Kale himself. He carried me over to the cot and gently laid me down upon the soft furs. They were blissfully warm against my chilled skin. "Rest here," he said, his voice softer now in the confines of the small space. He straightened up, his tall frame seeming to fill the entire cottage. For a moment he just stood there, looking down at me, his expression unreadable. I felt a pang of fear that he might leave, that this sanctuary was only a temporary reprieve. "Don't go." The thought was so powerful it was almost a physical ache. As if hearing my silent plea, he moved toward the fireplace, adding another log to the flames. The fire flared, sending shadows dancing across the walls. "You are hungry," he stated, not a question. He moved to a small, curtained-off alcove that served as a kitchen. I heard the clink of pottery, the slosh of water. He returned with a wooden bowl of warm, fragrant stew and a cup of water. He knelt, beside the cot again, holding the bowl out to me. My hands were trembling too much to hold it steady, a fact that did not escape his notice. Without a word, he took the spoon, filled it, and brought it to my lips. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I was not a child to be fed, but I was too weak, too exhausted to refuse. I parted my lips and accepted the spoonful of stew. It was rich and savory, filled with tender meat and root vegetables. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. He fed me in a comfortable silence, his movements patient and unhurried. Each spoonful was a small act of kindness that chipped away at the wall of ice around my heart. When the bowl was empty, he helped me drink the water. My thirst was a raging beast, and I drank deeply. He took the empty cup and bowl, setting them aside. He then retrieved a small wooden box from a shelf near the hearth. Opening it, he revealed several small jars and pots. He selected one, a dark earthen pot that smelled of herbs and something faintly medicinal. "This will help with the pain," he explained, uncorking it. He gently unwrapped the bandage on my leg. I braced myself for the sight of the wound, but he shielded it from my view with his body. He scooped a thick green salve from the pot and, with the same incredible tenderness as before, began to apply it to the bite. The moment the salve touched my skin, A cooling, numbing sensation spread through my leg, extinguishing the fire of the pain. It was like magic. I let out a sigh of relief, my body going limp with the release of tension I hadn't even realized I was holding. He worked methodically, his focus absolute. His touch was clinical, yet profoundly intimate. I watched his hands, strong and capable, as they tended to my injury. These were the hands of a warrior, calloused and scarred, yet they moved with the grace of a healer. When he was finished, he redressed the wound with a fresh, clean bandage. He pulled a thick fur blanket up to my chin, tucking it around me as if I were a child. "Sleep," he commanded softly. "No one can harm you here." He rose and moved to a chair by the fire, settling into it with a quiet grace. He did not take his eyes off me, his silver gaze a silent, watchful vigil in the firelight. I should have been afraid. I should have been full of questions. But all I felt was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and a nascent sense of trust that defied all logic. My body, finally free from pain and fear, began to surrender to sleep. As my eyelids grew heavy, I thought about the way he had looked at me, not at my tattered dress or my dirty face, but at the shimmering silver hairs that sometimes appeared on my skin. He had looked at them with reverence. The word echoed in my mind. Reverence. No one had ever looked at me with anything other than disgust or pity. He said he was looking for me. The thought drifted through my mind as I slipped into the welcoming darkness of sleep. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. And in the heart of that hidden valley, guarded by a powerful stranger with silver eyes, I slept without dreams of being hunted. I slept, for the first time, as if I were home. If you think Kale is hiding something, drop a comment with your theories, and don't forget to like this video to support more stories like this. I awoke to the gentle morning light filtering through a small window and the rich, earthy scent of brewing tea. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. The furs I was nestled in were impossibly soft, the air warm and still. Then the memories of the previous night came rushing back. The proving, the betrayal, the hunt, the terrifying and beautiful stranger who had saved me. My eyes snapped open, and my gaze immediately shot to the chair by the hearth. It was empty. A cold fist of panic clenched in my stomach. He's gone. The thought was a shard of ice in my chest. Of course, he was gone. Why would he stay? He had saved me from my family, but he was a stranger. He had his own life, his own path. I was just a stray he had helped out of pity. I struggled to sit up, my body aching and stiff. My injured leg throbbed with a dull, manageable pain, a testament to the efficacy of his salve. As I pushed the heavy furs aside, the cottage door opened. Kale entered, his arms laden with firewood. He moved with a quiet confidence, his presence instantly filling the small space and chasing away the shadows of my fear. He didn't seem surprised to see me awake. He simply nodded a greeting, his silver eyes briefly meeting mine before he turned to stack the wood neatly by the hearth. He wore the same dark, practical clothing as the night before, but in the morning light, I could see the fine details of his face more clearly. He was even more striking than I had realized, his features carved with a timeless, aristocratic elegance that was at odds with the rustic simplicity of the cottage. There were faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, and I realized with a jolt that he likely hadn't slept at all. He had watched over me all night. The realization sent a warm, unfamiliar flush through me. He finished with the wood and turned his attention to a small pot simmering over the fire. "I made tea," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "It will help with the healing." He poured the dark, fragrant liquid into 2 clay mugs. He brought one to me, his fingers brushing mine as I took it. The brief contact sent a now familiar jolt of electricity through me. I wrapped my cold hands around the warm mug, inhaling the steam. It smelled of mint and chamomile and something else, something wild and woodsy. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice still rough from sleep. He took the other mug and sat in the chair by the fire, cradling it in his large hands. We drank in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the gentle birdsong from outside. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was a comfortable, peaceful silence, the kind I had only ever read about in books. "How is your leg?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Better," I answered honestly. "Much better. The salve. It's like magic." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. "It is a kind of magic. Old magic." I took a sip of the tea. It was warm and soothing, and I could feel it chasing away the last vestiges of sleep and fear. I needed to know more. I needed to understand. "Kyle," I began, my voice tentative. He looked up, his full attention on me, his silver eyes patient and waiting. "Why were you there? In the woods last night?" His expression grew serious. He set his mug down on the hearth. "I told you. I was looking for you." "But why me? What am I to you?" I asked, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'm I'm a dud. I can't shift. My own pack threw me away. I'm nothing." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, the familiar litany of my own worthlessness. Kale's gaze hardened, but not at me. It was a flash of anger directed at the words themselves. He rose from his chair and came to kneel by my cot again, just as he had the night before. He reached out, not to touch me, but to gently finger a loose strand of my hair that had fallen across my face. It was a simple, unconscious gesture, but it was rife with a strange intimacy. "You are not nothing," he said, his voice low and intense. "What your pack sees as a flaw, what you have been taught to believe is a curse. It is not. It is a gift. A sacred one." My heart started to beat faster. What was he talking about? He looked at my hand, which was resting on the fur blanket. "The silver," he said softly. "May I?" I was so stunned I could only nod. He gently took my hand in his thumb stroking over my knuckles. His touch was reverent. "For generations, the Alpha Kings have awaited the return of the silver moon." Silver moon? Alpha Kings? The terms were from old legends, bedtime stories told to wolf pups about the origins of our kind. They weren't supposed to be real. The stories say that the silver moon is a wolf born with the touch of the moon itself in their blood. A wolf who cannot shift in the traditional way because their power is not of the beast, but of healing, of balance. He looked up from my hand, his silver eyes boring into mine. The legends say their fur, when it appears, is the color of pure moonlight. They are said to have the power to soothe raging beasts, to heal mortal wounds, and to bring peace where there is conflict. They are the heart of the packs, the counterbalance to the Alpha's strength. I stared at him, speechless. It was impossible. A fairy tale. I was Alara, the failure, not some legendary figure. I can't do any of those things," I whispered, pulling my hand away. The loss of his touch was an immediate, aching cold. "You have been taught to fear your own nature," he countered, his voice gentle but firm. "Your power has been suppressed, beaten down by those who did not understand it. But it is there, Ilara. I saw it last night. When you were in pain, when you were afraid, the silver manifested. That is your wolf, not a beast of tooth and claw, but a spirit of light and healing." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intense murmur. "The Alpha King is the sword and shield of our people, but the prophecy states that he is incomplete without the silver moon, his mate. She is his anchor, his heart. Together, they maintain the balance of our world. My mind was spinning. Mate. The word struck me like a physical blow. In our culture, the bond between fated mates was the most sacred, most powerful connection that could exist. It was a bond of souls, unbreakable and eternal. It was also incredibly rare. You think? You think I am this silver moon? I asked, the words feeling alien on my tongue. And that you? I am Kale, the Alpha King, he confirmed, his voice resonating with the quiet authority I had sensed from the beginning. And you, Ilara, are my mate. I have felt your presence for years, a distant light in the darkness. When your pack cast you out, the bond flared like a supernova. It guided me to you. I would have torn the world apart to find you. The sheer conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty in his eyes, left no room for doubt. He believed it, every impossible word, and a terrifying, traitorous part of me, the part that had yearned for acceptance my entire life, wanted to believe it too. But it was too much. Alpha King, Silver Moon, mate. The weight of it all was suffocating. I had gone from being a worthless outcast to being the prophesied mate of the most powerful wolf in existence. It was a cage of a different kind, gilded and beautiful, but a cage nonetheless. I was not a healer. I was not a queen. I was just Ilara, and I was afraid. Still with me? Show some love with a like, and tell me in the comments what you think Ilara's true power really is. The revelation hung in the air between us, heavy and shimmering like a heat haze. Alpha King, Silver Moon, mate. The words echoed in the sudden ringing silence of the cottage, each one a stone dropped into the still pool of my life, the ripples spreading out to shatter everything I thought I knew about myself and the world. My first instinct was to deny it, to laugh at the absurdity. It was a cruel joke, a fantastical story spun by a lonely, powerful man who had mistaken me for someone else. But I couldn't deny the truth in his silver eyes, the unwavering conviction that radiated from him like heat from the sun. He believed it with every fiber of his being. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. I scrambled back on the cot, pulling the furs around me like a shield. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, you're wrong. It's not me. I'm broken. The word came out as a choked sob. It was the deepest, most fundamental truth of my existence. I was a failed wolf, a genetic dead end. The silver that appeared on my skin was not a mark of divinity. It was a brand of shame, the physical manifestation of my inability to be what I was supposed to be. Kyle's expression was a storm of conflicting emotions. I saw hurt, a flash of it so raw and deep it stunned me. I saw frustration, but overriding it all was a profound, unshakable patience. He did not push, did not argue. He simply held my gaze, a silent testament to his belief. What you call broken, he said softly, his voice a balm on my frayed nerves. I call unique. What you see as a curse, I see as a miracle. You see what you want to see, I retorted, my voice gaining a desperate edge. You see a prophecy, a legend. You don't see me. If you knew me, you would know how wrong you are. I can't even protect myself, let alone be the heart of the packs. The memory of my father's and Lyra's wolves, their eyes filled with murderous contempt, flashed in my mind. I shuddered, the feeling of their teeth in my flesh a phantom pain. Kale's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. The air in the cottage grew cold, charged with his barely suppressed fury at the memory of my attackers. That was not a failure of your strength, he said, his voice dangerously low. It was a failure of their love, a failure of their duty. They will be held accountable for it. I don't want accountability, I cried out, my control finally snapping. I just want to be left alone. I don't want to be a prophesied mate or a queen or a healer. I spent my entire life as a disappointment in a cage. This, this is just a bigger cage. The outburst left me breathless, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had yelled at the Alpha King. The realization sent a fresh wave of fear through me, but it was too late to take the words back. Kale didn't react with anger. Instead, his expression softened into something that looked heartbreakingly like understanding. He rose slowly from his kneeling position and took a step back, giving me space. "I hear you, Alara," he said, his voice calm and steady, a rock in the turbulent sea of my emotions. "And you are right. I have burdened you with titles and prophecies when you are still bleeding from the wounds of your past. Forgive me." The apology was so sincere, so unexpected, that it completely disarmed me. He wasn't trying to force me into a role. He was listening. "This cottage is a sanctuary," he continued, gesturing to the small room. "It is outside of any Pax territory. It is warded. You are safe here. You can stay as long as you need. No one will ask anything of you." He turned and walked to the door. "I will hunt. We will need food. Rest. Heal." And with that, he was gone, slipping out the door as silently as he had entered. I was left alone with the crackling fire and the whirlwind of my thoughts. His words echoed in my mind. "What you call broken, I call unique." For 20 years, I had been defined by my lack, my inability to shift, my failure to conform. Everyone, from my parents to the lowest ranking Omega, had reinforced this view. My identity was built on a foundation of worthlessness. Kale was the first person to ever suggest that my flaw could be a strength. It was a concept so revolutionary, so antithetical to my entire life experience, that my mind struggled to even grasp it. Could it be true? Could the silver wisps I had always hidden in shame actually be a sign of some hidden power? I looked down at my hands. They were just hands. Pale, slender, with dirt under the nails from my fall in the forest. There was nothing special about them. I thought back to the moments the silver had appeared, under the sting of Lyra's taunts, in the agony of the pack bond snapping, in the terror of being hunted. It was always tied to intense emotion, to pain and fear. It had never felt like a gift. It had felt like a symptom of my brokenness. And yet, Kyle, his power was undeniable. His title, Alpha King, felt as natural to him as breathing. A being of his stature would not be prone to flights of fancy. He had been so certain. He had looked at me with such reverence. Could I have been wrong about myself my entire life? The thought was a terrifying seed of hope, planted in the barren soil of my soul. I was afraid to let it grow, afraid that it would be ripped out by the roots, leaving me even more empty than before. But the seed had been planted nonetheless. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, my thoughts circling endlessly. I drank the rest of the tea. I gingerly tested my leg, finding that I could stand and even limp a few steps around the small cottage. The healing was happening at an unnatural speed. The magic salve? Or perhaps something more? As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the valley, Kale returned. He carried a brace of rabbits, his movements economical and precise as he prepared them. He worked in a comfortable silence, seeming to sense that I needed time to process. He roasted the meat over the fire, and the savory smell filled the cottage, making my stomach rumble. He served me a portion on a wooden plate, and we ate together, sitting by the fire as darkness fell outside. The fear and turmoil inside me had not vanished, but they had subsided into a quiet, watchful uncertainty. I looked at Kale, his powerful form silhouetted against the dancing flames. He had offered me safety, kindness, and a version of myself I had never dared to imagine. He had asked for nothing in return. He was a king, Yet he had hunted for my food and tended to my wounds. He was my fated mate, yet he had given me space when I had pushed him away. Perhaps, I thought, as I watched the firelight play in his silver eyes, perhaps this was not a cage. Perhaps this was a key. If this betrayal just made your blood boil, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you'd do if you were Ilara right now. Days bled into one another in the peaceful solitude of the hidden valley. A rhythm established itself, quiet and or comforting. Kale would leave at dawn to hunt or patrol the sanctuary's borders, always returning by midday. He brought me food, fresh water from the stream, and bundles of herbs for my tea. He never spoke of prophecies or mates again. He simply existed alongside me, a steady, unobtrusive presence. He gave me the one thing no one else ever had, the gift of quiet acceptance. He asked no questions about my past, didn't press me to talk about the trauma of my rejection. He seemed to understand that the wounds were too raw, that silence was its own form of healing. I watched him constantly, my curiosity a hungry thing. I saw the way he moved, with the contained power of a predator at rest. I saw the way he would sometimes stare into the fire, his silver eyes distant and filled with a sorrow so ancient it made my own feel small and new. I saw the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin, a king isolated by the very power that defined him. He was a puzzle I was slowly, cautiously, beginning to piece together. My leg healed with astonishing speed. Within 3 days, I was able to walk without a limp, the bite mark fading to a pale, silvery scar that shimmered faintly in the light. The magic in his salve was potent, but I suspected my own strange biology was playing a part. My body, it seemed, knew how to mend itself. One afternoon, while Kyle was away, I was exploring the small meadow behind the cottage. A flash of movement in the tall grass caught my eye. It was a young fox, its leg caught horribly in a rusted metal trap, likely left by some human poacher years ago. The creature was frantic, its eyes wide with pain and terror. It snarled at my approach, baring its small, sharp teeth. My first instinct, born of a lifetime of being told I was fragile, was to run and find Kale. But he was gone. The fox was suffering. A wave of empathy so strong it was dizzying washed over me. I could feel its panic, its agony, as if it were my own. Without thinking, I knelt in the grass a few feet away. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice soft. "I'm not going to hurt you." I held out my hand, palm up, in a gesture of peace. The fox continued to struggle, its whimpers tearing at my heart. I had to do something. I reached into the well of feeling inside me, the deep, aching compassion for this small, wounded creature. I focused on it, pouring all my will into a silent plea for it to be calm, to be safe. A strange warmth spread through my chest and down my arm. I looked down at my outstretched hand. The skin was shimmering with a soft, silvery light. Fine, gossamer hairs, the color of spun moonlight, were sprouting from my knuckles, my wrist, my forearm. It was my curse, my shame. But this time, it didn't feel shameful. It felt right. The fox stopped struggling. Its frantic panting slowed. It stared at my glowing hand, its dark eyes no longer wild with fear but wide with a dawning curiosity. Slowly, cautiously, I moved closer. I reached for the cruel metal jaws of the trap. They were rusted shut, too strong for my human hands to pry apart. Desperation and a fierce, protective instinct I didn't know I possessed surged through me. "Let go of him," I thought, directing the command at the inanimate object. I placed my silver-dusted hands on the trap. The metal, cold and rusted, grew warm beneath my touch. With a groan of protesting metal, the jaws of the trap sprang open. The fox, freed, scrambled back a few feet, its injured leg held off the ground. It didn't run. It sat and watched me, its head cocked to one side. I looked at my hands. The silver light was fading, the fine hairs receding back into my skin, leaving it smooth and pale once more. I had done it. I had actually done it. The realization was a thunderclap in my soul. Kale was right. It wasn't a curse. It was a power. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the expenditure of energy leaving me weak. I sat back on my heels, my heart pounding with a mixture of shock, awe, and a terrifying, exhilarating joy. I was so engrossed in the moment that I didn't hear Kale's approach. Ilara. His voice, close behind me, made me jump. I whipped my head around. He was standing at the edge of the meadow, a dead stillness about him. His silver eyes were fixed on the now empty trap, then on the fox, which was cautiously licking its wounded leg, and finally, on me. His expression was one of profound, unadulterated awe. He had seen. He had seen it all. He walked toward me slowly, his gaze never leaving my face. He knelt in front of me, his eyes searching mine. "You felt it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I could only nod, my throat tight. The power. I I didn't know, I stammered. I just wanted to help him. "That is the key," he said, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across his face. It transformed him, chasing away the shadows of sorrow and loneliness, making him look younger, almost boyish. "Your power is not a weapon to be wielded. It is an extension of your heart. It responds to your compassion." He reached out and gently took my hand, the one that had glowed with silver light. He turned it over in his thumb tracing the lines of my palm. "You are a healer, Ilara. It is your very nature." Hearing him say it now, after what I had just done, felt completely different. It wasn't a prophecy being forced upon me. It was a truth I had just discovered for myself. The seed of hope he had planted had just broken through the soil. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or fear, but of overwhelming, cathartic release. 20 years of shame and self-loathing began to wash away in that one, silent drop. Kale reached up and gently wiped the tear away with his thumb, his touch sending a shiver through me. "You are not broken," he murmured, his silver eyes holding mine. "You are magnificent." In that moment, looking into his eyes, I finally, truly, began to believe him. The walls I had so carefully constructed around my heart began to crumble, and for the first time, I felt the tentative, fragile stirrings of something I had never allowed myself to feel before. A connection, a bond, the pull of a fated mate toward his other half. It was terrifying, it was wonderful, and it was undeniably real. This moment right here, this is what it's all about. If you're feeling the power of this scene, hit that like button and comment your favorite moment so far. The incident with the fox was a turning point. It was as if a lock had been turned inside me, opening a door to a room I never knew existed. The fear of my own nature began to recede, replaced by a cautious, burgeoning curiosity. Kyle, sensing the shift in me, began to gently guide me. He never pushed, never instructed, but he would create opportunities. He brought me a bird with a broken wing, a young deer with a festering wound, a cluster of plants in the forest that were withering from a blight. Each time I would hesitate, my old insecurities whispering their poisonous doubts in my ear. "You can't. You'll fail. You're not good enough." But then I would look at the suffering creature or plant, and the well of compassion inside me would overflow, silencing the negative voices. I would reach out, and the silver light would answer my call. It would flow from my hands, warm and gentle, mending broken bones, closing wounds, coaxing life back into dying leaves. Each success was a small victory, another stone laid in the foundation of my new identity. I was not Ilara the dud. I was Ilara the healer. The power, I discovered, was exhausting. After each healing, I would be left drained and weak, often sleeping for hours. Kale was always there when I woke, a cup of nourishing broth or tea in his hands, his presence a silent, steady source of strength. During these quiet moments, we began to talk. He told me of his life as the Alpha King, of the immense burden of responsibility he carried. He spoke of the centuries he had spent alone, his fated mate a distant abstract promise, the loneliness a constant ache in his soul. My power is one of command, of strength, of ending conflicts, he confessed one evening as we sat by the fire. It is a lonely power, Ilara. It creates distance. For centuries, I have been a king, a general, a judge. Never just Kale. He spoke of a betrayal in his past, a close friend and advisor who had tried to usurp his throne, driven mad by jealousy. The coup had failed, but it had left a deep scar on Kale's heart, making him wary of trust, reinforcing his isolation. It taught me that power attracts those who wish to use it, he said, his gaze lost in the flames, not those who wish to know the man who wields it. His vulnerability was a revelation. This powerful, godlike being was just as wounded in his own way as I was. We were two sides of the same coin. He, isolated by his immense power. I, isolated by my perceived lack of it. We were both outcasts. I found myself opening up to him in return. I told him of the coldness of my parents, the relentless cruelty of my sister, the suffocating weight of a life spent as a constant disappointment. I spoke of the deep, aching loneliness, the desperate yearning to belong. He listened without judgment, his silver eyes filled with a fierce, protective anger on my behalf and a deep, empathetic sorrow for my pain. He made me feel heard. He made me feel seen. And in seeing me, he was healing the parts of me that my silver light couldn't touch. The bond between us, the one he had spoken of, deepened with every shared story, every quiet moment. It was no longer a terrifying prophecy, but a living, breathing connection. It was in the way my heart would leap when he returned to the cottage, the way I could almost feel his presence even before I saw him. It was in the way he would look at me, a look of such profound tenderness and adoration that it made my breath catch in my throat. One evening, the comfortable peace of our sanctuary was shattered. Kyle returned from his patrol long after dusk, his face grim, his movements tense. "What is it?" I asked, rising to my feet, my newfound calm instantly evaporating. "Your former pack," he said, his voice a low growl. "They are agitated. Your father has been making inquiries, trying to discover who challenged him. He has sent patrols far beyond his borders. They are stirring up trouble with the neighboring packs." My blood ran cold. My father was not a man to let a humiliation go unanswered. "They are looking for me?" I whispered. "They are looking for the wolf that defeated them," Kale corrected, his silver eyes flashing. "But in their arrogance, they are a stone kicked into a hornet's nest. They trespassed on Sunstone territory today. There was a skirmish. A young Sunstone wolf was badly injured." He paced the small cottage, his contained energy making the room feel claustrophobic. "The Sunstone Alpha is calling for retribution. The other Alphas are choosing sides. Your father's pride is going to start a war." A wave of guilt washed over me. This was my fault. If I had never existed, if Kale hadn't intervened. "This is not your fault, Ilara," he said, his voice softening as he saw the look on my face. He stopped his pacing and came to me, placing his hands on my shoulders. "This is the result of your father's arrogance and cruelty. He is the one who broke the ancient laws." I looked up at him, my heart aching for the young wolf who was hurt, for the peace that was being threatened. "The injured wolf? Can I help?" The question was out before I could think about it. The old Alara would have hidden, terrified. But the old Alara was gone. Kale's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of pride in their depths. "It is dangerous," he said. "The Sunstone Pack is notoriously territorial. They will not welcome a stranger." "I don't care," I said, a new, fierce resolve hardening my voice. "I can't just sit here and do nothing while others suffer because of me. You said my power was for healing, for balance. What good is it if I hide it away?" A slow smile spread across Kale's face. It was the smile of a king who had just seen his queen claim her crown. "I had hoped you would say that," he murmured. "But you will not go alone. I will go with you." "They will see you as a threat," I argued. "You are the Alpha King. Your presence might make things worse." "I will not go as a king," he said, his expression resolute. "I will go as Kale, your guardian." He paused, his hands tightening slightly on my shoulders. "And your mate. I will not let you walk into a hostile camp alone." The word mate no longer sent me running. It settled in my chest, a warm, solid weight. It felt like a promise, a shield. "Okay," I breathed, my fear warring with my determination. "Okay. We'll go together." It was a reckless, dangerous plan. We would be walking into the heart of a conflict, into a camp of angry, suspicious wolves who could tear us apart in a heartbeat. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from the danger. I was walking toward it. And I was not alone. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the pack. Drop a like and comment what you want to see happen next in Alara's journey. The journey to the Sunstone territory was a tense, silent passage through the deepening night. We moved under the cover of the forest, Kale leading the way, his senses on high alert. He was no longer the gentle companion of the cottage. He was the Alpha King, a silent predator in his element, his every movement radiating a lethal grace. I followed close behind, my own senses stretched thin, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but the resolve I had felt back in the cottage was a steady flame that held the worst of the terror at bay. I had a purpose now, a reason to be brave. As we neared the border of their territory, Kale stopped, holding up a hand. He closed his eyes, his head tilted as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear. "Sentries," he murmured, his voice barely a breath of sound. "Two of them, just ahead." He opened his eyes, and they glowed with a faint silver light in the darkness. "They are on edge. They will attack first and ask questions later." "What do we do?" I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "We announce ourselves," he said calmly. He took a step forward, out from behind the cover of a large fern. "But we do it on our terms." Before I could ask what he meant, he let out a low, resonant call. It wasn't a howl of challenge, but something else entirely. A sound of deep, ancient authority. A summons that demanded to be answered, not fought. It was the call of an alpha of alphas. The forest fell silent. Then, from the shadows ahead, two large wolves emerged, their fur the color of burnished gold. They were in defensive postures, lips curled back to reveal sharp teeth, low growls rumbling in their chests. But there was confusion and a primal, instinctual fear in their eyes. They had never heard a call like Kale's before. Kale stood tall, his hands held open at his sides in a gesture of non-aggression. He did not shift, but his aura of power was a palpable force, pressing down on the two sentries. I stepped out from behind him, my heart pounding. The sentries' eyes flickered to me, their growls intensifying as they registered a stranger, a potential threat. "We are not here to fight," Kyle said, his voice calm and steady, carrying easily through the tense air. "We have come to offer aid. We heard of the young wolf who was injured." The larger of the two golden wolves, clearly the leader of the pair, took a hesitant step forward. His growl subsided into a suspicious snarl. "Who are you? How do you know of our pack's business?" "My name is Kyle. This is Ilara," he said simply, offering no title, no explanation of his power. "News travels on the wind. We are healers, passing through. We wish only to help." The wolf snorted, a sound of disbelief. "We need no help from outsiders. Our own shamans are tending to him." "Is he healing?" Kyle asked, his silver eyes pinning the sentry with their intensity. The wolf hesitated, a flicker of worry crossing its canine features. The hesitation was all the answer Kale needed. "Your alpha would not refuse any chance to save one of his own," Kale pressed, his voice reasonable but with an underlying steel. "Allow us to speak with him. If he turns us away, we will leave in peace." The two sentries exchanged an uncertain glance. Kale's power was a confusing, intimidating thing. He was clearly an alpha, but he bore no pack scent they could recognize, and my presence, a seemingly human female, only added to the mystery. After a long, tense moment, the lead sentry gave a curt nod. "Follow," he grunted, turning, "but make one wrong move and we will tear you to pieces." He led us through the forest to the Sunstone encampment. It was a large clearing, filled with the scents of wood smoke, wolf, and blood. The pack members watched our arrival with open hostility, their golden eyes tracking our every move. The air was thick with grief and anger. In the center of the camp, near a large bonfire, a crowd was gathered around a young wolf lying on a bed of furs. His breathing was shallow and ragged, and the smell of infection was sharp on the air. An old, grizzled wolf, the pack's shaman, was chanting and sprinkling herbs over him, but I could feel from here that it was not working. The life force of the young wolf was fading. A massive, golden-furred alpha, his face a mask of worried authority, stood over the injured youth. This had to be the Sunstone Alpha. He looked up as we approached, his eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. "What is this?" he boomed, his voice a low growl of thunder. "Who are these strangers?" "They claim to be healers, Alpha Boran," the sentry said, bowing his head. "They offered to help young Reese." Alpha Boran's gaze swept over us, dismissing me instantly and, lingering on Kale with suspicion. "We have no need of wandering hedge wizards," he snarled. "Leave my camp." "Your shaman's magic is failing," Kale stated, his voice devoid of judgment, a simple statement of fact. "The boy is dying." The alpha let out a roar of fury and grief, lunging forward. "You dare?" Kale didn't flinch. He simply stood his ground, his power rising to meet the alpha's charge. The air crackled between them. "Stop!" I cried out, stepping forward from behind Kale's protective form. All eyes turned to me. I was terrified, my entire body trembling, but the sight of the dying boy, Reese, spurred me on. "Please," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "Let me try. I can feel his pain. I think I can help him." Alpha Boran stared at me, his rage turning to stunned disbelief. "You? A human?" "I am not what I seem," I said, finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. I looked from the alpha to the dying wolf. "Every moment you waste arguing, he gets weaker. What harm is there in letting me try? If I fail, you have lost nothing. If I succeed, you gain back your packmate, your son." The last word was a guess, based on the sheer depth of the alpha's pain, and I saw from the flicker in his eyes that I had guessed correctly. He looked from me to his dying son, his hard expression crumbling with desperation. He was a father about to lose his child. He was out of options. "If you harm him further," he growled, his voice thick with unshed tears, "I will flay the skin from your bones." He stepped aside. It was a concession. The crowd parted, creating a path for me to the wounded wolf. I took a deep breath and walked forward, my legs feeling unsteady. Kale was right behind me, a silent, powerful shadow. I knelt beside Reese. He was barely more than a pup. His fur was matted with blood and sweat. The wound on his flank was deep and jagged, the flesh around it dark with infection. I could feel his life slipping away, a flickering candle flame about to be extinguished. I closed my eyes, shutting out the hostile stares of the pack, the crackling of the fire, everything. I reached inside myself for that well of compassion, for the silver light. It came more easily this time, a familiar warmth spreading through my veins. I placed my hands gently on the wound. The silver light flowed from my palms, bathing the pup in a soft, ethereal glow. The pack gasped. I could feel the infection, a hot, venomous thing, and I focused my energy on cleansing it. I felt the tearing of his muscles, the splintering of his bone, and I wove them back together with threads of light. It was an intricate, exhausting dance, a battle of life against death fought in the space beneath my hands. The power flowed through me, more than it ever had before. It was a torrent, a river of moonlight, and I was its conduit. I felt Reese's life force stabilize, the flickering flame growing stronger, steadier. His ragged breathing evened out. The angry redness of the wound began to fade, the torn flesh knitting itself back together under my touch. When I finally pulled my hands away, I was panting, my body slick with sweat, my muscles trembling with exhaustion. The wound was gone. In its place was only smooth, new skin, covered with a faint dusting of silver that quickly faded. Reese let out a soft whine and stirred. His eyes fluttered open. He was weak, but he was alive. The clearing was utterly silent. The entire Sunstone pack stared, their golden eyes wide with disbelief and awe. Alpha Boren fell to his knees beside his son, touching the healed wound as if he couldn't believe it was real. He looked up at me, his face a mask of raw, unadulterated gratitude. You saved him," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. He then looked at Kyle, who stood behind me, his face impassive but his eyes shining with pride. "Who are you?" Boren asked again, but this time the question was not a challenge. It was a plea for understanding. Kale stepped forward, his regal bearing undeniable. "She is Ilara, the Silver Moon," he said, his voice ringing with power and pride. "And I am Kale, the Alpha King. We have come because the balance is threatened, and she is here to restore it." The collective gasp of the pack was a wind rushing through the trees. They fell to their knees one by one, their heads bowed not in fear, but in reverence. They were kneeling to their king and to the healer who had just performed a miracle in their midst. I looked at the sea of bowed heads, at the healed pup now licking his father's hand, at the powerful king standing beside me. I was no longer an outcast. I was no longer afraid. In the heart of a hostile camp, surrounded by wolves who had wanted to kill me minutes before, I had finally, truly found my place. You've been on this journey with Ilara from the beginning, and it means everything. Show your support with a like, and tell me in the comments if you want more of Ilara and Kale's story. The aftermath of the healing was a whirlwind of awe and reverence. The Sunstone Pack, their hostility transformed into stunned devotion, treated us like visiting gods. Alpha Boren, his gruff exterior completely stripped away, could not do enough to show his gratitude. He offered us the finest furs in his own den, the choicest cuts of their latest hunt, and his unwavering, eternal loyalty. He looked at me with the eyes of a true believer, his gaze holding a mixture of wonder and fear, as if he were in the presence of something holy. It was a disconcerting feeling. I had gone from being invisible and scorned to being the center of intense, worshipful attention. It was just as isolating in its own way. The only anchor in this strange new reality was Kale. He stood by my side, a shield against the overwhelming veneration of the pack. He handled Alpha Boron's endless questions with regal diplomacy, explaining the prophecy of the silver moon in broad, mythic strokes, carefully omitting the intimate detail that I was his mate. He presented my power not as a personal attribute, but as a gift from the moon itself, a force for the good of all packs. He was protecting me, I realized, not just from physical threats, but from the crushing weight of their expectations. That night, as I lay on a pile of furs in the Alpha's den, sleep would not come. The events of the evening replayed in my mind. The fear, the desperation, the incredible surging feeling of the healing power flowing through me. It was real. I had done it. I had saved a life. But the cost was high. A deep, profound exhaustion had settled into my bones, a weariness that was more than just physical. Being a conduit for that much life force had drained me on a spiritual level. Kale, sensing my restlessness, came to sit beside me. The den was empty, Boron having insisted on standing guard outside the entrance himself. "You cannot sleep," Kale observed softly, his voice a low comfort in the dark. "I keep seeing it," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the den's ceiling. The wound, the infection. I can still feel it, the feeling of his life slipping away. I turned my head to look at him. His face was cast in shadow, but I could feel the intensity of his silver gaze. And I feel empty, like something was taken from me. "Something was," he explained, his voice gentle. "To heal, you must give a part of your own life force. You are a vessel, Alara. The moon's power flows through you, but it exacts a toll. With time, you will learn to shield yourself, to draw more from the moon and less from your own essence. But you are new to this. You gave too much." His explanation made sense. It explained the bone-deep weariness, the hollow feeling in my chest. "Will it always be like this?" I asked, a flicker of fear in my voice. The idea of feeling this drained every time I healed someone was daunting. "No," he said with certainty. He reached out and took my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. His touch was warm and grounding, a current of strength flowing into me. "You are not alone in this. As my mate, we are connected. My strength is your strength. Let me help you." Before I could ask what he meant, he closed his eyes. I felt a gentle, probing presence at the edges of my mind, the touch of his consciousness against mine. It wasn't invasive or forceful, but a soft, respectful inquiry. "May I?" The thought was not his voice, but a pure, untranslated feeling of intent. Hesitantly, I relaxed my mental barriers. I gave a silent assent. A warm, silver energy flowed from his hand into mine, spreading up my arm and through my entire body. It was his life force, his immense, ancient power, and he was pouring it into me, replenishing what I had lost. The hollow feeling in my chest filled with a radiant warmth. The exhaustion receded, replaced by a deep sense of peace and vitality. It felt like drinking from a cool, clear spring after a lifetime of thirst. The connection between us was no longer just an emotional bond. It was a tangible, living thing, a bridge of light and energy. Through it, I could feel him. I felt his immense loneliness, the crushing weight of his duty, the deep, aching void that his centuries of solitude had carved into his soul. And I felt his love for me, a love so vast and powerful and unconditional, it took my breath away. It was not the possessive, prideful love my father had for his position, but a reverent, worshipful love that saw me not as an object or a prophecy, but as his equal, his completion. Tears streamed from my eyes, silent and hot. They were tears of grief for the love I had never known, and tears of overwhelming joy for the love I had just found. He was refilling my energy, but I, in turn, was filling the empty spaces in his soul. I was the anchor he had been missing, the heart he had been searching for. We were healing each other. When he finally pulled back, the energy transfer complete, we were both breathless. He opened his eyes, and the raw emotion in them mirrored my own. He lifted his other hand and gently brushed the tears from my cheeks. "Now you see," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Now you understand. We are two halves of a whole, Ilara. Without you, I am just a sword. With you, I have a reason to fight." The last of my walls crumbled, the last of my doubts washed away. This was not a cage. This was not a burden. This was my destiny. And it was more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined. I leaned forward and, for the first time, initiated contact. I pressed my lips against his. The kiss was not one of fiery passion, but of deep, soulful recognition. It was a kiss of homecoming, of two lost souls finally finding their way back to each other across centuries of waiting. It was a promise, a vow, a sealing of the bond that was already forged in our very spirits. In that moment, I was no longer Ilara the outcast, or even Ilara the healer. I was his, he was mine, and we were whole. Almost there. If this story has had you on the edge of your seat, give it a like and drop a comment telling me your favorite scene so far. The news of the miracle at the Sunstone camp spread like wildfire. Whispers carried on the wind, passed from pack to pack, growing from rumor to legend in a matter of days. A healer with the touch of the moon, the return of the silver moon from the old stories. And she was accompanied by a mysterious, unbelievably powerful alpha who commanded the respect of even the fiercest pack leaders. My father, Valerius, heard the stories. His scouts brought him news of Alpha Boren's newfound reverence for a moon-blessed healer and her guardian. The description of the guardian, a massive black wolf of unparalleled power, left no doubt in his mind. It was the same wolf who had humiliated him in the forest. It was the wolf he was hunting. His rage, already simmering, boiled over. In his mind, this was an elaborate trick. I, his worthless dude daughter, had somehow allied myself with a powerful rogue alpha to challenge his authority. He could not conceive of me possessing any real power. Therefore, it had to be a deception, a plot to shame him and usurp his position. He saw it as the ultimate betrayal. He became obsessed. He pushed the Blackwood Pack to its limits, sending out war parties, violating territories, all in a desperate search for me and Kale. His actions were destabilizing the entire region. Packs that had been at peace for generations were now sharpening their claws, preparing for a war that seemed inevitable. Kale received reports from his own network of loyal followers, lone wolves and betas scattered throughout the territories who owed allegiance only to the Alpha King. The news was grim. My father's paranoia was a plague, infecting everything it touched. "He is forcing my hand," Kyle said one evening, his face carved from stone as he read a message delivered by a hawk. We had left the Sunstone territory, retreating to another of Kale's hidden sanctuaries, this one a cave system behind a waterfall. He has declared a conclave of alphas. He is using the old laws to force a meeting, claiming a rogue power is threatening the balance. He intends to brand us as traitors and unite the packs against us. "He's using the law to justify his own war," I said, my voice filled with a mixture of disgust and a familiar, weary sadness. "He always has. The law is whatever serves his pride." "He does not know who I am," Kyle continued, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "He thinks I am just some powerful rogue. He intends to trap me at the conclave, to force me to reveal myself and then accuse me of using you, a known defective, to seize power through trickery and false prophecy." "He will turn them all against us," I whispered. the weight of the coming confrontation settling upon me. Not all of them, Kale countered. Boren of the Sunstone Pack will stand with us, and a few others are old enough, wise enough to be wary of your father's warmongering, but many will be swayed by him. He is a charismatic and ruthless leader. He looked at me, his expression softening. We do not have to go. We could disappear, live a life of peace in the hidden places of this world. I would give up my crown for you in a heartbeat, Ilara. His offer was a sweet, seductive song. A part of me, the part that still remembered the terrified girl hiding in the woods, yearned for that peace. To run away from it all, just the two of us. But I was not that girl anymore. I looked down at my hands. They were no longer the hands of a victim. They were the hands of a healer. My power was meant for balance, and the world was tipping into chaos because of my father's hatred. No, I said, my voice firm. We can't run. Running is what he expects me to do. It's what I've always done. If we run, he wins. He will start his war, and countless innocents will pay the price for his ego. I stood up and walked to him, taking his hands in mine. You are the Alpha King, and I am the Silver Moon. This is our responsibility. We will go to the conclave. We will face him. Together. A fierce pride burned in Kale's eyes. He squeezed my hands, his strength flowing into me. His intention is to put you on trial, he warned. He will force you to try and shift, to prove you are a true wolf. When you fail, he will call you a fraud. Let him, I said, a strange calm settling over me. My power isn't in the shift. He thinks my weakness is my inability to become a beast. He's wrong. My strength is my ability to heal one. The conclave was to be held in 3 days at the ancient gathering place known as the Ancestors' Peak, a neutral ground at the very center of the territories. The journey there was fraught with tension. We were no longer hiding. We walked openly, and the news of our approach preceded us. Some wolves we passed would bow their heads in respect, having heard the tales from the Sunstone Pack. Others would snarl, their loyalty already pledged to my father's cause. We arrived at the Ancestors' Peak at dawn on the 3rd day. It was a vast, flat plateau, encircled by jagged peaks that clawed at the sky. In the center was a ring of ancient standing stones, pulsing with a faint, dormant magic. The alphas of the 10 major packs were already there, each with their 2 most trusted champions. I saw Alpha Boren, who gave us a grim but determined nod. I saw the others, their faces a mixture of suspicion, curiosity, and outright hostility. And then I saw my father. He stood before the largest of the standing stones, flanked by my sister Lyra and his beta, Marcus. He looked every inch the powerful, confident alpha, but I could see the frantic, paranoid energy behind his eyes. He saw us approach, and a cruel, triumphant smile spread across his face. He had his prey in his trap. Kale and I walked into the center of the circle, the eyes of the most powerful wolves in the land upon us. The air was thick with power and animosity, a storm about to break. My father stepped forward, his voice booming across the plateau. So, the great rogue and his pet human finally show their faces, he began, his voice dripping with scorn. He pointed a finger at me. This is the source of all our troubles. My disgraced daughter, Ilara, a dud who could not even pass her proving. She has allied herself with this stranger to spread lies, to poison the packs with false prophecies, all to undermine the true-born alphas of this land. He turned his attention to Kale. And you. You trespass on our lands, challenge a lawful alpha, and use this pathetic creature to sow discord. I call for judgment. By the old laws, I demand this charlatan be unmasked. The challenge was made. There was no turning back. Kale met my father's furious gaze with an icy calm. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he spoke, His words carried the weight of mountains. You speak of the old laws, Valerius of Blackwood, Kale said, his voice resonating through the stones. Then you will honor them. You have called the conclave. You have made your accusation. Now, we will have judgment. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave him a small nod. I'm ready. I stepped forward, my gaze sweeping over the assembled alphas. I was terrified, but I pushed it down. My voice, when I spoke, was clear and steady. My father is right, I said, causing a murmur of confusion to run through the crowd. I cannot shift. I cannot become the beast he so prizes. I looked directly at Valerius, at Lyra, who was smirking with victory. He sees this as a weakness. He is blind. He believes power only comes from tooth and claw. He is wrong. A challenge came from a hostile alpha in the crowd. Then prove it. Show us this power of yours, witch. Before I could respond, Lyra stepped forward, her eyes burning with a cruel, familiar fire. I will give her a chance to prove it, she sneered. And with a blur of motion she shifted, her sleek, dark wolf launching itself not at me, but at the nearest neutral party, the aging, respected alpha of the Silver Creek pack, a she-wolf named Alara. Lyra's attack was a shocking breach of the conclave's neutrality. She raked her claws across the old alpha's side, sending her tumbling to the ground with a cry of pain before Kale could even move. It was a calculated act of chaos, designed to prove I was powerless to stop violence. But she had made a fatal mistake. She had created a wound. And that was where my power reigned supreme. That's the end of this incredible journey. If you loved Alara's transformation from outcast to legend, hit that like button one last time and tell me in the comments what other stories you want to hear next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The collective gasp of the alphas was sharp and immediate. Lyra's attack was an unthinkable sacrilege on the sacred ground of the conclave. It was a blatant act of dishonor that reflected on her entire pack. My father's face, which had been a mask of triumphant glee, morphed into a snarl of fury at his daughter's reckless move. She had overplayed her hand, revealing the barbarism at the heart of their cause, rather than my supposed weakness. But the damage was done. Alpha Alara lay on the ground, blood pooling from the deep gashes in her side, her champions rushing to her aid. Chaos erupted. Accusations were hurled like spears across the circle of stones. The fragile peace of the conclave shattered into 1,000 pieces. Lyra, her point seemingly made, backed away, a savage smirk on her wolfish face. She looked at me, her amber eyes filled with contempt, as if to say, "See? You are useless." In the midst of the shouting and posturing, a profound calm settled over me. This was my moment. This was the trial. Not the one my father had intended, but the one the fates had decreed. I ignored the chaos, the angry alphas, my gloating sister. I walked toward the wounded she-wolf, my focus narrowing, until she was the only thing that existed in my world. Kyle moved to follow me, his protective instincts on a razor's edge, but I held up a hand, stopping him. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the din with unexpected authority. "This is mine." He stopped, his silver eyes filled with a mixture of concern and absolute trust. He gave me a single, sharp nod. He would let me face this alone. The Silver Creek champions bristled as I approached, moving to block me from their fallen alpha. "Get back, witch!" one of them snarled. I didn't stop. I met his gaze, and I let him see the power in my eyes. "I am here to heal her," I said, my voice ringing with a certainty that gave them pause. "Let me pass." I knelt beside Alpha Ilara. She was old, her silver-streaked muzzle stained with blood. Her breathing was shallow. She looked up at me, her eyes clouded with pain but still sharp and intelligent. There was no fear in them, only a weary curiosity. I placed my hands on her wound. I didn't need to close my eyes this time. I looked directly at my father, at Lyra, at every wolf who had ever called me weak, and I let the power flow. The silver light erupted from my hands, brighter and more potent than ever before. It was not a gentle glow this time. It was a radiant, cleansing fire. A wave of pure, concentrated life force pulsed outward from me, washing over the entire plateau. The shouting stopped. Every wolf, from the mightiest alpha to the lowest beta, was frozen in place, stunned into silence by the sheer magnitude of the power I was unleashing. They could feel it, a profound sense of peace, of healing, of life itself. It was a power completely alien to their world of physical dominance and brutal strength. Beneath my hands, Alpha Alara's wounds knitted themselves together at a visible rate. The torn muscle, the severed veins, the ripped skin, all were made whole again in seconds. The blood vanished, absorbed back into the mended flesh. I poured my energy into her, replenishing her strength, washing away the pain and the shock of the attack. When I lifted my hands, the wound was gone. Not even a scar remained. Alpha Alara took a deep, shuddering breath and rose to her feet, her movements no longer frail, but filled with a new, youthful vigor. She looked down at her side, then up at me, her old eyes wide with a reverence that silenced all dissent. The plateau was utterly still. The only sound was the wind whispering through the standing stones. I stood up, the silver light slowly receding from my hands, and I faced my father. The look on his face was one of complete and utter devastation. His entire worldview, the foundation of his power and pride, had been annihilated in a single, irrefutable moment. His dude daughter, the family shame, wielded a power greater than any he had ever known. A power he could not fight, could not dominate, could not understand. Lyra was trembling, her wolf form shrinking back, her arrogant smirk replaced by a mask of pure terror. She had tried to expose me as a fraud, and had instead revealed me as a goddess. Alpha Born of the Sunstone Pack was the first to break the silence. He stepped forward and went down on one knee, bowing his head to me. "The silver moon," he said, his voice filled with awe. Then Alpha Alara, the wolf I had just healed, knelt as well. One by one, the other alphas, even those who had been hostile, followed suit. They knelt before me, not just as a healer, but as a true source of power, a force of balance their world desperately needed. Soon, every wolf on the plateau was kneeling, except for two. My father and my sister remained standing, isolated in a sea of their own failure and shame. Kale stepped forward, his presence radiating an authority that dwarfed them all. He stood beside me, his hand resting on the small of my back, a silent, unshakable support. "Valerius of Blackwood," Kale's voice boomed, and this time he did not hide the power within it. It was the voice of the Alpha King, and it made the very stones tremble. "You have broken the sanctity of the conclave. You have fostered conflict and dishonored your bloodline. You have rejected a sacred gift from the moon itself. You are no longer fit to be called Alpha." He looked out at the kneeling Alphas. "I, Kael, the Alpha King, strip you of your rank and your lands. You are packless." The words, the very same words my father had used to destroy my life, were now used to end his. The irony was a palpable thing. My father let out a strangled cry of rage and despair. He finally understood who Kale was, understood the sheer scale of his miscalculation. He had not challenged a rogue, he had challenged his king, and he had lost everything. In a final, pathetic act of defiance, he lunged, not at Kale, the source of his ruin, but at me, the target of his lifelong hatred. I did not flinch. I did not move. Before he could take 2 steps, a black blur of motion intercepted him. Kale, in his massive wolf form, slammed into my father, sending him flying. He stood over him, one massive paw on his chest, a low, lethal growl rumbling in his throat. It would have been over in a second, but I stepped forward. "No, Kale," I said, my voice calm. I placed a hand on his massive, furry shoulder. He looked at me, his silver eyes burning with a protective fire. "He is beaten. Let him live with his shame. That is a fate worse than death for a man like him." Kale held my gaze for a long moment, then he slowly, reluctantly, removed his paw. He stepped back to my side, his presence a dark, looming promise of what would happen if my father ever threatened me again. Valerius scrambled to his feet, a broken, defeated wolf. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a new, terrifying emotion, fear. He turned and fled, Lyra scrambling after him, 2 ghosts running from the dawn. They were packless. They were nothing. And as they disappeared over the horizon, a new era began. An era not just of strength, but of healing. An era of balance, my era.